Wow, quite a 5 years, and the difference between 2019 and today, our first conference in DC and today, remarkable. And what a change from our very last NatCon 2 months ago in Brussels. I know that many people mentioned it, and it's one of those things we just all keep repeating war stories. It's like a sickness, and I really am beginning to understand the vets that can only hang out with other people who are there. But what's amazing is that we can actually focus on the conference itself instead of fighting those who are trying to shut us down, quite literally, martial law style. And this is not a metaphor. The metaphor had been broken by flak jackets, guns, helmets, tactical gear, all worn by the riot police that came in to empty our conference hall and eventually to cordon us off. This really also was another broken metaphor. That's what cordon sanitaire looks like. We actually had a cordon. And all of it was hyper-legalistic, though hardly just. But these men and women came with the mayor's orders in hand, in a democracy, by the way, that had this freedom of speech and of expression guaranteed in its constitution since 1830. So much for that. So Brussels was our own organization's experience of something that we spent some time discussing here. It was mentioned from this stage, and it was mentioned from one of the breakout rooms, and that's Lawfare. It was relatively short, but intense and educational. What you do, life as you know it, literally gets suspended. You don't live it as you want to live it. That becomes a sideshow, and you focus entirely on survival, and a very expensive survival at that. So those who think that it's funny that we talk about lawfare, it's not funny, it's traumatizing, and I'm sure it's meant to be. And we were exceptionally lucky. We happened to have some of the finest lawyers in Europe, quite literally right there, in the conference hall, in the audience, and in one of the panels. An amazing team from ADL. But imagine, well, not only an amazing team, but also a team that offered its services and was eager to help, stayed with us, did not go home to their wives and kids, and stayed up basically for 30 hours straight wearing the same suits. I will be grateful to them forever. And we became friends. You do become friends in the trenches. At the same time, imagine a really ordinary person going through it, a regular family, or, as the case may be, an opposition politician no longer in office. Oh wait, we don't have to imagine that. So lawfare is not just about using law against political opponents. Lawfare, which is why we're talking about it here at a philosophical political gathering, is about turning the opposition into dissidents. That's a very serious Rubicon to cross. If dissidents can be persecuted and unjustly imprisoned in the name of our democracy, quote, we're no longer dealing with democracy. And it's a question worth asking. What is it then that we are dealing with? The best way I can answer is to tell you a joke that we used to tell in Poland of my childhood, which was still communist, and laughter is really important. It's a real godsend when things get hyper-real and surreal. The joke went like this: what's the difference between democracy and people's democracy? And the answer was the same as between a chair and an electric chair. So I couldn't help, from the first moment when I heard the phrase our democracy, I kept thinking electric chair. It's just incredibly weird conditioning. And I still think about it that way. And actually, oddly enough, Poland is that place that now restored our democracy and restored the rule of law. That is, there is really no law that won't be broken. Politicians are stripped of their parliamentary immunity, persecuted, put into prison. TV stations are raided by police stations. It's a long list, so it will get boring and I will run out of time. But suffice it to say that the answer of the rest of the world is, well, silence and praise from the European Commission that's congratulating the new government on restoring the rule of law and saving our democracy. So the electricity is plugged in. And there is no reason, this is really by now Poland and East Central Europe are normal countries. There is no reason for that not to spread. And this really isn't just hypothetical. This year, we were very lucky to have an extremely wide range of speakers. We always do, but the nationalities were unusual. We had prominent speakers from the US, the UK, India, Hungary, Poland, Israel, and incredibly, Iran in exile, and then some. Everybody came with the same problem, and everybody knew what everybody else was talking about, even though our experiences, symbolically, slightly differed. Different outfits, different looking people, different traditions, different religions, but we all knew exactly what our problems were, and they were remarkably similar. Everyone, all of us, everywhere, we're all being told that being conservative, feeling tied by the bonds of loyalty to our nation, to the people who share our language, who share our stories, our historical memory, our values, is morally reprehensible. Conservatives may win power, but few have the nerve to stand firm, deliver on their promises, and withstand the slings and arrows of constant, viciously hostile commentary in long form, short form, on evening news, talk shows, art shows, schoolrooms, university lecture halls, social media, sometimes if somebody is really unlucky, in supermarkets. All the institutions, all the media telegraph the same message to conservatives. Everything about you is wrong, morally, that is. What's morally dubious happens to be all the things we know is not just worth living for, but quite literally dying for. Our families, our kids, spouses, parents, our homes, our faith, our historical memory, our traditions, our attachment to a place, that place itself, the nation we feel ourselves to be a part of, and our sense of belonging. What seems benign, moving, and tender, and makes you cry when you hear certain songs that we all know by heart, suddenly becomes divisive, hateful, or worse, if somebody gets the telling just right. We heard this story repeated over the last 3 days by speakers from all over the world, from the podium, in the hallways, and over shared meals. And with no alternative to the negative messaging on offer, no mainstream at any rate, a conservative begins to believe it. And even if you don't, it's hard to be indifferent to constant attacks and words of opprobrium. Why do you think the conservatives turn ever left? While the electorate that elects them wants them to have the courage to stand up to the onslaught, they fend off the attack by backing off and literally think about breaking under torture. It's a certain torture. It's a psychological torture. And many do what they need to do to stop feeling this incredibly unpleasant sensation. And it's not surprising. All of us want to belong. We want to be accepted. We want to feel a little better rather than worse about ourselves. We're vain, after all. We cave in, be nice. And it's just another way to say surrender out of fear to be disliked and excluded. We do it out of vanity, but also a simple need to think well of who you are. After all, love is love. No human is illegal. Trans lives matter. Should I go on? An inversion of values through the absence of judgment. Judgment itself becomes, what's the word for it? Problematic. This pressure in words spoken or written, said in our faces, in your face or behind your back, is clever, and it works. It always has. And not just in middle school, by the way. We have the technology now to never, ever, ever let us grow out of that discomfort. In our submission, we bow before the will of the people, if you want to have Rousseau's words for it. Or we submit to the poets, the unacknowledged legislators of the world. That would be Shelley. These sayings were all written by people who had no majorities, and they knew it. This legislating by forming fashionable opinions and excluding those not enlightened enough to follow and appreciate was the march through the institutions a century before Gramsci invented it or the institutions even existed. The pressure is designed to work this way, and it's supposed to be applied to the recalcitrant conservative mind. As Marx insisted, and Rusty Reno, quoting Ryszard Legutko, reminded us, the point is not to interpret the world, but to change it. There is no intellectual integrity in this operation. It's designed not to have it. And we are the thing that needs changing. And the words are the tools of that change. Stalin was even more explicit famously when he said, writers are the engineers of the human soul. We often think of it as propaganda, but it's not. It's not just propaganda. It's a way to break the spirit. And this is, by the way, insane. And that's why these meetings, NatCon, wherever it's held, are so important. Why what we at first jokingly and then increasingly seriously, after the media took our word for it, started calling Nationalist International. It really matters. Our conferences strengthen the spirit of those who come, the spirit of those that the engineers of the souls are hell-bent on breaking. They give us perspective. They allow us to compare notes. They let in laughter where fear was reigning. They give us courage. They give us a sense of strength that notoriously eludes the lonely. And there is another reason. These encounters give us a better understanding of ourselves. Yes, ourselves. It's not just those we meet. Of ourselves and of our own countries. Kipling once said, "Who knows England, who only England knows?" And it was about travel. It's a special kind of intelligence gathering that any nation could use. And that's what we do here. We don't go native when we travel or encounter, but we experience other places as we are, sons of daughters of our own land. And it is about our own land that we learn the most in those encounters with others. As national conservatives, we know it because we know who we are. We do not have an identity crisis or a loyalty crisis. We're not citizens of the world. Our sense of belonging is more local. We miss home whenever we're not there. That's true for us and for our guests from all over the world. And one interesting takeaway from our guests, one after another, they were all telling us that America's greatest export is the culture war that's not welcome, not compatible with their homelands, and as divisive abroad as it is here at home. It is almost funny that DEI is an acronym with the name recognition from India to Europe and to Middle East, literally rivaling successful corporate brands. We have to stop it. It's an embarrassment, and it makes us uncompetitive in the world. We are just not desirable when we're this sanctimonious and this offensive. And needless to say, I'm not going to wrap a ribbon around it because there is no ribbon because we keep going. Our foreign policy suffers. Our national interests suffer. It's not clever to compete for influence with China if we demand of our potential partners a cultural makeover that violates their norms and offends their sensibility. Let's just assume that others are like us, even if they profoundly disagree with us, in the sense that they don't want us to tell them what to do. They don't want us to tell them how to be. They want to define their own destinies, to protect their culture and tradition, preserve their national identity and pride, be allowed to remain loyal to what's dear to them. A world of free nations, and one where that assumption goes without saying. That is something that those who truly dislike us, including the rows of cameras in the back of this room for the last 3 days, would really do well not to agree, but just contemplate it. Just give it a serious thought. Again, thank you so much for being with us for 3 days. Those of you who stay for dinner, we're looking forward to seeing you. And God bless and safe travels. And until next time, thank you so much.